coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast.
And when is that? When's it going to be? Next summer?
We've only been in 3 months.
Give us a break.
Blimey, you're a taskmaster.
Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guests, gossip and stories, normally from Westminster, but today we're in our GB News stand here in Liverpool at the Labour Party conference. With me on Chopper's Political Podcast this week is Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, and James Murray, the Executive Secretary of the Treasury. Wes Streeting, thank you for joining us here. Great to be here.
Great to be here with you.
You vowed to save the NHS. Can you guarantee there won't be another winter flu crisis this year?
I think there will almost certainly be a winter crisis this winter because the change we need to make in the NHS will take time. My focus this winter will be on patient safety and providing the best possible care against what will inevitably be a challenging backdrop. At the same time, you won't see me ducking those challenges, hiding away in my office in Westminster. I will be out on the front line with those clinical teams working in some of the hardest systems, and those areas that regularly, almost annually now, have a winter crisis, with my sleeves rolled up, listening, learning and preparing for the following winter so we can do better than our Conservative predecessors did.
And bring it around to delivering for voters who voted you in such numbers back in July. We just moments ago heard your leader, Sir Keir Starmer, speak about everything as a perspective of government. He talked about immigration and controlling it. Do you worry about the impact on social care? You know how often we rely on immigrants to come in and help our social care system not collapse.
On the contrary, I think it's part of my responsibility as the Health and Social Care Secretary to help the Home Secretary reduce net migration in this country, because we do have an over-reliance. And two things can be true at the same time. Firstly, we're really lucky that we've got some amazing people from around the world who come to our country to provide great care in our NHS and social care system. And I'm grateful to those people. But we're also over-reliant. And I think, frankly, for a long time now, we've had a culture that says we won't bother to train our own homegrown talent. We'll just nick people from elsewhere, which is, I think,
unfair on them,
unfair on those countries, but also unfair on people in our own country who might love the chance to work.
Why do we do that? Why do we rely on overseas labour? As he draining other countries of their nurses to support jobs here?
Well, I think on the NHS side is because training doctors, nurses and other NHS staff takes time and money. So there's a bit of a shortcut there. And then on the social care side, it's because, frankly, we don't pay or value our care staff enough. And I thought one of the bits of the Prime Minister's speech I loved was when he talked about his sister being a care worker and his determination to make sure that when she walks into any room and she tells people what she does for a living, she's treated with the same respect as her brother, the Prime Minister. We will only be able to do that if we pay those workers fairly, which is why, as Keir's Social Secretary, I'm not going to let him down or his sister down, or more than 1 million care staff. I'm going to make sure that we pay them fairly with the first ever fair pay agreement and a real professional career structure for social care.
You're a social care secretary, not a social secretary. That'd be a different job altogether. But you look at.
I mean, I've done a bit of social secretarying here at the Labour Party conference. Do you know, Chopper, it'd be really nice when people start calling me the social care secretary, not just the health secretary.
Well, we'll do it from this day forward. But Wes Streeting, were you disappointed to hear nurses reject that 5.5% pay rise during Rachel Reeves' speech? You talk about money. You know, I think polls very well paying nurses more money, but what's affordable?
Well, I get where nurses are coming from. I think they were treated abysmally by the last Conservative government, forced out on strike for the first time in their history in the case of Royal College of Nursing. We will do better. We will treat them better. What the Chancellor did when she came in, I think, sent a real signal to nurses and public sector workers more generally about the independence of the pay review bodies. She decided that it was in the interest not just of those staff, but of patients, pupils, passengers to settle on pay.
They said no.
And I'll be sitting... Well, look, I think, to be fair to the RCN, I think they wanted to send us a clear message. And I've heard the message, and I'm looking forward to sitting down and working with the RCN and other unions that represent nurses, because they're part of the team that I need on my side to rebuild the National Health Service, and I want to improve not just their pay but their terms and conditions.
Do you worry you're seen?
They're working.
Do you worry you're seen as a soft touch though? That's why they're coming back for more with the drivers. Not you personally, Wes Streeting. Not you personally, but the government itself looking at other settlements are quite generous.
No, I think. And I'll be talking to RCN and talking to nurses as well that they represent. About how they voted in their ballot and why, but my gut instinct, having spent a lot of time on the front line with nurses over the last few years, is they will have wanted to just lay down a marker early on with a new government, say, look, we're not happy about the pay and conditions, and they've certainly done that with sending the message they've done, and we will work with them to rebuild the NHS that we all want to see.
It's on migration, net migration. What level would you be happy with? Tens of thousands?
I was asked this earlier. It's hard enough being the Health and Social Care Secretary. I'm not going to try and be the Home Secretary. That is very much...
How do we judge your success on this idea?
Very much Yvette Cooper's from. I don't really believe in arbitrary targets, but the Prime Minister has been clear, the Home Secretary has been clear. They want net migration coming down, and actually I can make a big contribution to that as part of the team, making sure we are training and recruiting and retaining our own homegrown talent.
Yeah, you've spoken, of course, in your book, movingly, about your working class roots. How do you feel about this cut to the winter fuel allowance? What would your mum think about that, your family members?
Well, look, I get, especially for people who have received the winter fuel allowance and won't now receive the winter fuel allowance because it's being targeted only at the poorest pensioners, that they would rather have it than not have it. And when it comes to the choices that we face to balance the books, the Chancellor had to set out that choice earlier on, before the summer break, because it had to take effect ahead of this winter. So I think on the timing, we've had a kind of month or two where pensioners thought, OK, look, we get there are hard choices. But at the moment, where you've only heard about the hard choices for pensioners. And as you heard from the Prime Minister today, in his kind of characteristic honesty, there are further hard choices still to come. We're going to take those hard choices because it's vital we fix the foundations and build that brighter future that he described in his visionary speech.
He talks about brighter future and he says no return to austerity, but the language he uses is the language of austerity. He said, we're all in it together. George Osborne said that in 2009.
I think that was a slightly tongue-in-cheek reference, which is why there was sort of nervous laughter in the hall, because people thought, yeah, we've heard that one before. I think that the big political difference between our approach to balancing the books and George Osborne's approach, and I don't think I'm misrepresenting or mischaracterising my political opponent here. I think what George Osborne was very clear about was that, as well as getting the public finances under control, he had a political project that was about shrinking the size of the state and wanting small government.
Which he admitted to that, didn't he?
Yeah, and I'm afraid what we've seen since is the consequences of that. In our health service, in our schools, in our police, we believe in active government. We don't think government can do it all on our own, and we've got to work in partnership with business, with civil society, with all of us as citizens. But we do believe that there is an active role for government in driving economic growth, in our public services, safety, security, law and order. There is a big,
state can't sit that one out.
No,
be involved. Do you worry, though, that critics might say at some point in this, a 5-year government, you're the Tories in disguise? I can see that emerging, bubbling under. I was talking to Sharon Graham at Unite. You know how she's concerned about this winter fuel payment cut. That's a risk you're going down, or perhaps you don't mind about it?
Look, I'm used to being called a red Tory on social media, but I think, the speech we got from the Prime Minister today was a Labour Prime Minister's speech in the finest traditions of Attlee, of Wilson, of Blair, Brown. I thought it was an outstanding vision, but people also saw today the steel, because of course we've been used to coming to Labour conferences and seeing Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, changing the Labour Party, grabbing it by the scruff of its neck, shaking it off the complacency and the disregard for voters that we saw over the years of those defeats. And now the country have seen the same steel in their Prime Minister. Someone who changed the Labour Party with grit and steel and determination is now going to change the country with grit, steel and determination. I thought he had a real fire in his belly today. It was great to see the lighter side of Keir Starmer with some of the jokes he told and talking about his family, but also the hard as nails Keir Starmer as well.
And that heckler, he said, I'm not going back to 2019, a clear dig at the previous leader. Jeremy Corbyn.
To be honest, I'm convinced that we're now paying these protesters to come along to prove the point that we've changed.
Yes.
I just don't. I think it's so futile. It sort of underpins the futility of that kind of protest politics. The Labour Party wasn't founded to be a protest party. It was founded to be a party of change.
But now you're in government, it matters more, and the protests have been about Gaza, don't harm Israel, oil, just stop oil. I mean, these are issues. I mean, particularly on Israel and Gaza, that's quite divisive for the party.
But the irony was that we had a Prime Minister today who is now straight off to the United Nations General Assembly, who made it clear he is unequivocal about the return of the hostages, the need for a ceasefire, the need for a Palestinian state as part of a two-state solution, and the need for de-escalation on the border between Lebanon and Israel, and the need to face down some of Iran's kind of behaviour and the way in which they are actively organising some of the security threats that we've seen in the region and beyond. And I thought that was serious. I think the whole hall was with him on that. Not just the whole Labour movement, the whole country, I think, will be behind him in what he said.
Yeah. He talked on the issue of austerity, get the welfare bill down. Does that worry you?
No, not at all. I think it's a good thing. We've got to, and again, in terms of my contribution and what I can do to help Liz Kendall, our Work and Pension Secretary, I don't just want to, make sure we get people back to health. I want to make sure we can help them back to work too. And if they're stuck waiting on an NHS waiting list, whether for physical treatment or mental health treatment, what a waste of their time and a waste of their potential and a waste of the contribution that they want to make to our economy. So, as I always say to the Chancellor, particularly in discussions about the budget and the spending review, what's good for the nation's health is good for the nation's economy.
Okay. Nanny state worries our viewers and listeners.
Yeah.
Come on, I mean, what's going on with you? You like a vape? Do you vape? No, you don't.
No, I don't know. I was about to say virtuous, but
virtuous. You're very virtuous.
Anyone who's spotted me at the conference bar this week will know I'm not entirely virtuous.
I was out with you late one night too, I think, from vague memory. But why are you banning it in public? But do you want to ban pub gardens? What's that about?
On a serious note about public health, I've got a reform agenda that's based on health service reform and public health reform, because unless we grip both of those issues, we are going to end up being overwhelmed by a perfect storm of growing ageing society, rising levels of chronic disease and rising cost pressures. If we don't address this, we will bankrupt the NHS and leave our country without its health service. So we've got to take the right long-term decisions now.
Faith being in a pub garden, closing pubs early to stop people drinking. This is nanny state territory, which I'm sure you don't...
Look, I don't want to do things to people. I want to do things with people. We've got to take action on smoking. It's still the biggest killer in our country. Vaping's slightly different, by the way. I mean, obviously, it's nicotine, it's addictive, and it is unquestionably harmful. We don't yet know the extent that it's harmful. But what the advice that we've had is that if you're smoking and you use vaping to stop smoking, that is a better choice than smoking. But of course, not smoking or vaping is the healthiest choice.
But just on the point, yes, I get that. But pub gardens, pubs have a hard time anyway, as you know. Many are closing annually. Well, do you want to ban vaping in pub gardens?
Look, I firstly draw a distinction between smoking and vaping.
Or smoking in pub gardens.
Well, let's wait until you see the tobacco and vapes bill. We'll obviously be consulting on the measures, but I just gently point people back to the last Labour government's smoking ban, and there were really big, loud concerns from the hospitality sector then that we would kill pub trade and it would be a nightmare for hospitality. And actually, the opposite was true.
And that was to stop staff smoking.
More people employed now in pubs than there were before. And, look, I want to support our pubs. I certainly frequent them myself. And I don't want to do anything that harms the pub trade. And I don't want to be a national killjoy either. But what I do want to do is to make sure that when it comes to the health of the nation, we're not just living longer, but we're living well for longer. And the tragedy of where we are today is that we're living longer but becoming sicker sooner, which is damaging to the economy,
very
costly to public finances. And also, let's not forget, because I've not been entirely reprogrammed by the Treasury to believe that we're all economic units, but it's really bad for people's quality of life as well. And I don't know about you, but in the future, when I'm in retirement, I don't just want to be looking back on a life well lived. I want to be living life to the very end. So that means, you've got to focus on health now for health in later life.
When will things get better? When will things get better? When will it get better? Wes
I think
Streeting?
people are going to see the real improvement over the course of this Parliament. If you think back to just the last few months, so in the last few months, I've taken action on junk food ads being targeted at kids. I've put 1,000 more GPs on the front line. They'll be there by the end of the year. And I've taken action to resolve the junior doctors' strike that cost us billions of pounds and 1.5 million or so delayed, cancelled operations, appointments and procedures. You look at the government more broadly, Great British Energy, Great British Railways, the Secure Border Command, the work of change has already
begun. Give our viewers and listeners some hope.
The work of, well, I'll tell you what, let's end on a hopeful note. The work of change has already begun, but the best is yet to come.
And when is that? When's it going to be? Next summer?
We've only been in 3 months.
Give us a break.
Blimey, you're a taskmaster. But look, honestly, let's just end on the serious note, since you didn't let me end on the hopeful note. We know that we've got to deliver and that we're going to be judged by our actions, not simply our words. And I think you saw from the Prime Minister's steel and determination today, we will not let you down.
On that note, Wes Streeting, thank you for joining us today for GB News and our Choppers Political Podcast. Thank you.
Thank you.
James Murray, thank you for joining us on Chopper's Political Podcast here at the Labour Conference in Liverpool.
Thanks for having me on.
Good to. The week has started with Rachel Reeves giving a positive assessment of our country. She said that she sees that she feels positive about this country. It'll burn brighter. Why is it taking the 11th week of your time in office to be positive about this country's prospects?
Well, I think fundamentally we are optimistic and positive about what we can do as a country, because we know there are businesses across the country, people willing to invest, people who want to work in those businesses. You know, we all want to get the economy growing, but we also know that's going to take time. And we know that after the election, we had a terrible inheritance from the previous government. So, you know, for us, it's about getting the balance right. It's about being pretty straight with people, saying, look, the inheritance we have in terms of the public finances are a mess. They're going to take time to sort out. There's going to be difficult decisions of the budget on October the 30th. But at the same time, explaining to people, but this is why we need to take those difficult decisions. And this is the prize at the end of the day.
There was a prize. If it's a mess, why prioritise public sector workers' pay over pensioners, keeping them warm this winter?
Well, look, there's
an unfair choice.
There's no getting away from the fact there are going to be difficult decisions, which we've started taking already, and there are going to be more difficult decisions when it comes to tax, spending, welfare in the budget on October the 30th. But if you look at the example of public sector pay, for instance, you know, we had got used under the previous government to endless strikes, which was costing the economy, costing public services, meaning that patients couldn't get treated, you know, with appointments cancelled at the last minute. It was causing a real havoc in our public services. And so we came into office with a determination to reset relations with the public sector workers and try and move on from those never-ending strikes so that we can get on with the process of reforming our public services rather than being stuck in industrial action.
Do you worry that you've unleashed more demands? The nurses rejected a 5.5% pay rise during the Chancellor's speech on Monday.
Well, look, we recognise that a lot of people in the NHS in particular and other public services, you know, have been working very hard for many years, and the Chancellor made clear that she wants to work with them to reform public services. But you can't do that reform if you're constantly in industrial action.
Yes.
Constantly in with strikes or threats of strikes. You know, you have to move on from that to start reform from happening. And I think, you know, what the nurses need to know is they have a government now who wants to work with them to get the NHS back on their feet.
Is there more money for them?
Well, look, we'll work through this together with the nurses, but the point is we need to make sure that together we're reforming the NHS and get it back on its feet.
You announced the plans with the winter fuel payment in July and then the big increase in the state pension in September. Why were those two moments apart? If you'd done them together, it may have been an easier political message to sell.
Well, was
there a reason to do it in July?
So the important context to see this as in is that, you know, the decision around targeting the winter fuel payment, so it goes now to pensioners on pension credit, was a difficult decision. It was a tough choice to make, but we think it was a fair, right decision to make in the context of the public finance we've inherited, where we are going to have to take tough decisions. You know, to make this means-tested, we felt was the right thing to do. I think you've got to see it in that context alongside the state pension, which for us is the fundamental sort of foundation of state support for pensioners. And if you look at the state pension, last year it went up by £900. We know now, subject to what the Department for Work and Pensions, the Secretary of State there decides, is likely to go up by £460 next year. That's based on the latest data around earnings and so on, which is why it's only become apparent later in the year.
So why don't delay and announce at the same time? Just I think on a messaging basis, would that not made more sense?
Well, the uprating for the pension becomes apparent as the data comes out closer to the time for the uprating to take place in April next year.
And why not delay the cut to the fuel payment until you can announce it at the same time as the pension?
So one of the reasons why we decided that we took the tough but necessary decision around targeting the winter fuel payment is because of the in-year spending pressure that we're facing. Now, this is quite an important point because, going into the election, we knew and everyone knew that the finances were going to be in a mess in the long run, and there was going to be some tough decisions had to be taken. But what we didn't realise till we got in is quite what a mess it is this year. And just to be really clear what that means. That means in-year money being spent this financial year that we have to make add up by the end of the year. That's this 22
You couldn't
billion
wait until September. You had to do it in July.
Well, it's also the point that with the winter fuel payment, we wanted to make sure that we were giving people advance notice, starting the campaign about getting people to sign up to pension credit.
Yeah.
That had to start. We wanted to make sure people were starting that straight away. But that's obviously an in-year saving. But the context for it, as well as, making departments absorb some of the pay pressures, is about dealing with this in-year budget.
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
It's cold outside in Liverpool this week. Pensioners are protesting. Do you want to say sorry to them? I'm sorry that we've taken this money away from you.
Well, I want to say that I realise it's a tough decision, and it's not a decision that I or any of my colleagues wanted to have to take. We didn't come into politics to want to do this, but we are in a financial mess. And, I wish I could say that was the last difficult decision we were going to have to take,
yes.
But there will be many more difficult
Well, what is
decisions.
coming? Is it you're going to leave, fuel duty might go up, or you might remove the single person's council discount?
Well, I can't comment
Bus
on...
passes for old people?
So that I've got to leave all of that for the Chancellor of the budget.
It's you me talking. No one's listening.
Is that right? Oh, okay. Well, I'll tell you then. I think if I did tell you any of what's going to be in the budget, I wouldn't be Exchequer Secretary by the end of the day.
You'd be out of a job. There's no issue with pensioners, is there? Some are saying it's because pensioners are more likely to vote Conservative, they're more likely to vote Brexit. There's no Labour beef with pensioners, and that's why you're going after that group of people.
Oh, look, not at all. That's why we're saying the state pension is fundamental for us, and why the triple lock, being protected for the duration of this Parliament, is something that we said in the manifesto and now in government we are committed to. We want to make sure the pensioners are supported in old age and retirement. That's why the state pension is so important for us. Now, I think the state pension, has gone up a decent amount last year. It will continue to go up next year. I think from now until the end of the Parliament, we're expecting to go up by some £1,700. That for us is the foundation of state support for pensioners. We want to make sure that's in place.
The context of that is that's why maybe a pan benefit on pensions is less important than having one targeted those who need it most.
Well, I think what was interesting in the debate around the winter fuel payment while we were debating in Parliament is that I don't think anyone really disagreed with the principle that it should be means tested. Having a universal benefit that goes even to those pensioners who do have a high income or a higher levels of wealth. People did feel that means testing was appropriate. Obviously, we had different decisions and different points of view about how to means test it, but I think people generally accept in all different parties and different sides of Parliament that in the current financial situation, means testing it, moving away from a universal benefit was the right thing to do.
So hope is around the corner. I mean, you are still saying it's going to be a difficult budget, probably cutting benefits, increasing taxes and the like, but after that, you'll be able to show us some sunny uplands, maybe.
Well, I think we're getting on right now with the road to the more positive future, if you like, because when we got in, two things happened at the same time. Firstly, the Chancellor commissioned the audit of public finances, which revealed the £22 billion black hole.
Is that a real number? The Tories say they dispute that number, of course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is robust analysis done by Treasury with other
OBR confirm it, you say?
Well, the OBR actually complained under the previous government, but the previous government didn't give them the information about the in-year spending pressures, and they're doing their own review into the processes around that. But from our point of view, this is one the Treasury and other departments, have made clear is the in-year spending pressures.
Yes.
The point I wanted to make alongside that was that whilst that's about the fiscal inheritance, we also got to work straight away with some of the crucial reforms we need to do to get the economy growing, around planning, for instance, ending the ban on onshore wind energy, some of the housing reforms that we're doing in the planning system, making it quicker to give consent to data centres and life sciences, all the sort of stuff that we need to build more of in this country. Those are the reforms that we started in the first few weeks in office as well. So, yes, difficult decisions, but at the same time, we're laying the ground for the growth, which will get us into a better place as a country.
There's been lots of noises off, haven't there, about freebies. Is that your suit you pay for yourself? Wasn't donated to you?
This suit, this suit I wore to my wedding, and it was actually a gift from my dad.
Okay.
The wedding gift from my dad. So.
Well, except that in the world of journalism. But it's difficult to understand, isn't it, from your colleagues, Rachel Reeves, Angela Rayner, Keir Starmer, being given clothes and spectacles and the like by donors. I mean, it's odd. You're all well paid, aren't you, compared to national average pay?
Well, look, I think it's frustrating to be talking about that rather than what we want to be talking about, which is the change that we've begun making and want to continue making in the country. I think actually, though, if you take a step back, if you zoom out, what people will see is you have ministers, former shadow ministers, who have been following the rules, making these declarations. In some case, being so keen to follow the rules, they're double checking, making sure we're doing everything by the book, and creating that transparency, which actually has meant this conversation can happen because everything is out there in the open. So if you see that rule following, which obviously is very important to Keir Starmer and the rest of us, and compare that with the rule breaking, which I think became synonymous with the previous government, I think people can see the difference.
And you are declaring it eventually. Some things have been declared, other things have been declared, and this is causing a debate, and you're being challenged over that. The budget, if you do increase taxes, as it seems you might do, how will that not risk damaging growing the economy? If the essential purpose of your government is growing the economy, do you risk damaging that by piling up more tax on us all?
Well, look, it's absolutely right that we want to make sure that the budget is a budget for growth as well, but we also need to fix the public finances. And we've come into government with commitments in our manifesto around not increasing taxes on working people, which means not to increase national insurance, income tax, VAT. We've also got a commitment that we're going to cap corporation tax at its current level. And actually, what a lot of businesses tell me...
What certainty?
Certainty. They want stability, they want predictability. That's what they want.
But CGT, entrepreneurs don't want to see that being going up to the same level as income tax, capital gains tax. That will damage entrepreneurs from risk-taking in this country, won't it?
Well, look, all of the decisions about individual tax measures the Chancellor will set out. But what the Chancellor's already said, and something which is relevant for me in my brief, is around publishing a further update on a business tax roadmap at the budget. And this roadmap will give businesses that certainty, that predictability, by saying, look, here is our roadmap around business taxation.
It moved around so much, and corporation tax has been a ping pong. If you look at the way it's up and down, 16% to 25 to 21, it's been all over the place.
Exactly, and our commitments going into the election about capping corporation tax at its current level of 25% and about making full expensing permanent. Those are two things which I think businesses really welcome.
I still hear that, particularly manufacturers.
Yeah, I'm putting that kind of information and other elements in our business tax roadmap. I think will go down well with businesses.
Just away from your Treasury brief, and briefly, thank you for your time joining us today at GB News in Liverpool. On immigration, do you understand why communities are concerned about immigration? I mean, do you see it as a far-right issue, for example, or one that is shared by many voters?
Well, no, I think it's the case that immigration into this country in recent years has been too high. We were very clear about that in the election campaign, and that we want to change that now we're in office. Obviously, one of the most sort of talked about elements that people see is people coming across the channel. But we think that the solution to that wasn't to follow a gimmick which isn't really going to work in practice. The Rwanda scheme, obviously, that the previous government pinned all of its efforts on, even though it didn't work and was a colossal waste of money. So what we said we want to do, and what Yvette Cooper as the Home Secretary has begun doing, is to launch our plans for a border security command to go after the gangs who are smuggling people across the channel and to really smash those gangs as a way of stopping this.
That's illegal migration, but you and the Treasury also hold the keys on legal migration. And back in the day, we've heard from successive Tory Home Secretaries saying the Treasury stopped them controlling legal migration because your biggest concern is growing the economy. Will you control legal migration, even if it might mean it's harder to grow the economy quickly?
Yeah, so I think the really crucial point for me here is the link between immigration and skills and training, right? And what I think has happened in this country for too many years is that the two sides of the equation, immigration and skills training, have been separate. So if there hasn't been enough people with the skills or the training in the UK to do a particular job or a particular role, that sector, that industry has relied on immigration to fill the gap. Now, what we're saying should happen is that if you have a high level of immigration in a particular sector, you need some immigration to fill gaps, and there's a shortage of occupationalists for that purpose. But if you have high levels of immigration, that should send a message to the skills system. We need to train more people with those skills to do those jobs. And that's the way I think you get to a more sustainable balance in the long run, where immigration fills gaps. You have a shortage occupation list, which is a long established feature. But you also have the skills system, which reacts to high levels of immigration in particular sectors and adjusts accordingly.
One of your roles is closing the tax gap, isn't it? Is that right? One of yours,
yeah.
the difference in tax, you should get to keep pulling into the Treasury, and that's which you're not. So that's the black economy. Is cash in hand a bad thing?
So there's different elements to the tax gap. If you look at the breakdown of what causes the tax gap, quite a lot of it is due to error or what they call in HMRC language, failure to take reasonable care, which is people making mistakes and so on. Some of it's also due to avoidance and evasion, and actually people who are deliberately avoiding paying tax. So what we want to do is make sure that we are pursuing those people who are not paying their fair share of tax, people who are clearly evading or avoiding their taxation, but also make it easier for everyone else to pay the right amount of tax first.
It's very complex, the tax rule book.
If you're an individual taxpayer or a small business, we want to make life easier. And a lot of that is to do with reforming the way that HMRC works. Greater digitization, simplification. A lot of that is to do with really focusing on making it a modern service. Because I think, most people want to pay the right amount of tax. But some people get, some of it's...
Is it wrong to pay a cleaner, a gardener, cash in hand? Is that a wrong thing to do?
Well, I think
immoral, maybe.
I think generally, if people pay via electronic means, it's sort of easier to keep track of what's going on. I think that however you get paid, whether it's electronically or in cash, people need to pay the tax that's due. And I think there's no excuse for not paying the tax that you owe, and we want to make it as straightforward for people to do that as possible.
Yeah. And just finally, on work from home. We're here at work, but do you work from home? And the HMRC apparently has lots of work from home people doing working from home, and there's complaints from people that it means they're not focused entirely on their jobs. They've got other things to do at home.
Well, I go into the office a lot. I mean, yes. I don't generally work from home.
So does Rachel Reeves, it seems.
Yes, I like being in the office. I think personally it suits me. I think the face-to-face interaction is good. I think that collaboration you get extra collaboration that can only happen when you're working with people, and you can have a quick chat and so on. For me, Zoom or meetings have never been a substitute for that. So on a personal level, I
have you asked your staff to come in more?
So the staff of the Treasury, yeah. Well, the staff who work with the Treasury, they're in the office a lot, and they're always there when I'm there. And I think occasionally some of them work from home on a Friday, but the default is to be there in the office.
And do you want to see that across the country? Is it time to declare the era of work from home on its way out the door over?
Well, I think we need to be a bit more flexible than that. I think we need to recognise that, we need some flexibility to enable people from different walks of life to participate.
Childcare issues and so.
Exactly, yeah. So I think we need to have flexibility in there. But I think, as I say, on a personal level, I recognise the benefit of myself being in the office to have that collaboration with different people I'm working with.
But you want to see it carry on, do you? Or you want to see rein back in a bit?
Well, I think it depends. Different industries and
being very diplomatic, aren't you?
I think it's not a big one size fits all, because different industries do operate differently, and it's up to different sectors and different employers.
Look, James Murray, you're a senior Treasury Minister. You've joined us on our stand here at the Labour Conference. I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to Chopper's political podcast this week. Particularly thank you to my two guests, Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, and James Murray, the Exchequer Secretary to the Treasury. I tweet at Christopher Hope on X and email me chopper@gbnews.uk. If you enjoyed this podcast, please do tell your friends. If you really enjoyed it, please leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. It helps other people to find this show. Thanks to the brilliant team of GB News colleagues behind this podcast here at the Labour Conference: Mick Booker, Jeff Marsh, Rebecca Nunes, George McMillan and Keith Bays. And most importantly of all, thank you to you for listening. If you want more Chopper in your life, and who doesn't, catch me during the week on GB News, popping up with political reaction and stories, and at midday when Parliament is sitting on Wednesdays for PMQs Live. And do keep up to date with all the best political reporting on our website, gbnews.com. Until next time, though, cheerio!